Hi, everyone. Welcome back from the break to the final two talks of our second session of the day. So to kick off this round of the session, we have Dori Grijseels from the University of California, San Diego, with a talk entitled A Model for Marmoset Monkey Turn-Taking. So Dori, you can take it away.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me. So yes, as Amanda said, I'll be talking about a model of marmoset monkey turn-taking. This is work that I performed at the Cortical Systems and Behavior Laboratory at UCSD. I'm currently in Frankfurt, continuing some of the sort of research that's here in the Social Systems and Circuits group at the Max Planck Institute. So very short on marmoset communication. So marmosets are these very cute, small New World monkeys. They are social animals, so they live in extended family groups, usually headed by the mom and dad, and living together with various siblings. And they perform very interesting social behaviors, such as cooperative breeding, for example. The particular behavior that I'm interested in is these phi calls that they produce for long-range communication. So these animals live in the South American forests, and they need to be able to locate each other through the thick foliage. So they do this with these high-pitched phi calls. And interesting about these phi calls is that they seem to engage in antiphonal exchanges. So you can see here on the right spectrogram, where at the top there's a virtual marmoset, so essentially a speaker making a call. And you can see that in this second instance, when the speaker makes a call, this live marmoset is responding with a call of its own, and it can make these exchanges in extended conversations. But the question still remains: is how do they coordinate this? How do they decide when not to reply, such as in the first case, and when to reply, and what their timing is? So this is the question that I decided to ask. So why do they decide to sometimes call and not to call? What determines when they respond to a particular call? And we just published this, or put our manuscript up on bioRxiv, and hoping to publish it soon. So if you want to know more and more of the details, I can recommend you go there as well and see. And I'm obviously happy to answer questions as well. So a rough experimental setup is I put two monkeys on either side of a room, separated by a curtain. So important about these phi conversations, as I said, they happen when they want to do long-range communication. So this is in particular in the absence of visual access to conspecifics. So they perform them basically when they can't see someone else. Unique about this experiment is that I didn't specifically select monkeys, but I essentially tried to get as many monkeys from our colony as possible, resulting in 42 individuals paired into 104 unique pairings and over 5,000 call exchanges. So this is a very large corpus that I wanted to use to answer these questions. So several hypotheses already exist on why they respond, why they call, and how they coordinate. The main sort of thought, back in 2006, 2009, there was a nice pair of papers. So first from Miller and Wang, and then a paper from Chen et al., showing that individual characteristics may affect these monkeys' response rate. So for example, the monkeys might respond more to an older monkey, they might respond more to a monkey of a different sex, or they might respond more to their bonded partner. So this is in cage mate status. Then a second hypothesis, which is currently the leading hypothesis, it has more to do with the coordination in particular, says that the monkeys may behave as a coupled oscillator. Meaning that essentially they both oscillate in their calls. They have like high states and low states, and they coordinate when they oscillate. So when one monkey is in a high state, so it's more likely to call, the other one is in a low state and less likely to call. I posed in the bioRxiv manuscript another hypothesis, which is that the specific call features might also have something to do with it. So basically maybe the frequency of the call, or the length of the call might indicate that a monkey will respond. However, testing all of these hypotheses with this very, very large corpus of data, none of them actually held up. And so we're back to square one with this question of why do the monkeys respond, and how do they decide? And in this analysis, the main predictor over everything that said whether a monkey would respond is its calling rate. And if you take away the monkey's calling rate, so the sort of innate desire to call, I was actually unable to predict whether a monkey would respond to any given call. Interesting about this response rate is you can see here on the x-axis almost all of the different monkeys that were included, and on the y-axis their average call rate across within a session, with each dot being an individual session for a monkey. And you can see that mostly within monkeys it's fairly stable. So you can see on the right side here we had a couple of very high calling monkeys such as Molly, Sylvia, and Neon, and they would always call very much regardless of who you put them with, time of day, any other factors. They would just keep calling. And then we had a couple monkeys on the left here, Carson and Maggie, who did not utter a single call in the entire experiment. So they seem to vary a lot individually. And so I took this idea and built upon that with a probabilistic model of marmoset calling, where I took this base probability, which is their innate chattiness essentially, and then build upon that with several factors. So I took internal states. These were based on observations that the monkeys are quite variable within themselves, as well as external factors such as the occurrence of interruptions or call responses. So I'll go into a little bit more detail on that. So firstly, the internal factors. So one observation that we made was that the monkeys seem to have this sort of innate fluctuation. You can see here, this is a plot of the running average of call rates in calls per second over a 30-minute session of two monkeys that are calling to each other. And especially monkey 2 here seems to have periods where it is more likely to call and periods where it's less likely to call. Now, within this behavior experiment, I'm not sure why this is. I expect that it has something to do with arousal or attention. I also expect that we might be able to find a sort of neural correlate of this, so that there's some sort of brain state that might have something to do with this as well. Then the second factor is this volubility decay, which is essentially the observation that they reduce their number of calls across time. And this is very, very well fitted with just an exponential decay. So essentially, the longer the session goes on, the less likely they are to call. And again, we thought that this may have something to do with arousal or attention. Then in terms of external factors, so this has to do with the presence of the other monkey and what the other monkey is doing. One important factor is interruptions. So in general, these monkeys avoid interrupting each other. What we see is that when interruptions do occur, they seem to happen within the first sort of half second, which is within the time frame that they may not have recognized that the other monkey has also started calling. So these are more akin to co-vocalizations, essentially. After that, some sort of vocal inhibition seems to set in, and the monkeys tend to not call when they already hear another monkey calling. And then the last factor, a model using these response curves, which is essentially the observation that when the monkey calls, it will stay silent for a little while after, before it will start calling again. Whereas after the partner has called, it is more likely to call, with a peak at around 4 seconds. And so taking all of these probabilities together, I created a model of marmoset calling and tried to sort of recapitulate the data. So as I said, it is a probabilistic model, so I'm not predicting individual calls, but rather I'm predicting the overall structure. And you can see here the ICI curve, which is essentially the probability in the y-axis of how long the time between two calls is. So the time between two calls on the x-axis. And you see that they roughly follow the same pattern with, again, a peak around 4 seconds. This is a measure that the coupled oscillator model used as to show that their model fit their data. I wanted to go further and show that our data can also create these conversations that I was talking about earlier. And so with using this probabilistic model, and to note, it doesn't have any factor in saying when a conversation is happening, it should keep going. It just responds to single calls. And we see that the same sort of conversations emerge from this model in terms of length, what you see here. So they're on average about just over 2 calls long, as well as the overall number of conversations that happen within a session. And so this model recapitulates the sort of overall structure of marmoset conversations quite well. Now, I also tried the same model across context. So I got monkeys where I only put a single monkey in the room. So they essentially called, but never got a response. Trained the model on the 2 monkey data, and then see how well it predicted or how well it recapitulated the 1 monkey data, and saw that it did quite well. And I repeated this, but with 3 monkeys. So 3 monkeys, all separated with curtains. And again, the monkeys acted as I would have expected based on the model. So it seems like the monkeys do sort of have some inherent probabilistic rules that they adhere to sort of inform how they should call. Now, this is more speculative, but I think that this model may work across other species as well. So I fitted it to this data from the Martev et al., and it seems to work decently well on their meerkat data, though there's a couple issues with directly fitting it there. And then my work that I plan to do here will be to test it out on the naked mole rat as well, because they seem to have similar antiphonal behavior as shown by AOC et al. And I wanted to see if they adhere to similar sort of implicit rules. And then just to wildly speculate, one of the future directions is to show that there is some neural basis as well to this model, because I wanted to kind of serve as a framework essentially to base our neural investigations on eventually, to see what is the neural basis of vocal communication. And so one idea is that potentially the way that the monkeys kind of decide to call is almost like a decision-making process, where you have on the left here, for example, in the blue, you have these cells that kind of like ramp up their activity until they reach some sort of threshold, and then they decide to call. And these sort of cells have already been shown in ACC, and it could be possible. I tried to do a little model of this, where if you indeed model this kind of ramping behavior, you get the sort of ICI curves that I've been showing you, where the monkeys preferably respond after about 4 seconds, depending on your parameters, but show this sort of probabilistic distribution. And so this is kind of my future work as well with the naked mole rats, is trying to dive deeper into what is the neural basis of this behavior. So that leaves me to thank Corey, who was the PI on this project, as well as Daniela, who is a great master student who helped a lot with the data collection, as well as the rest of the lab. I need to thank the vet staff, Athena, my monkey, and all the other monkeys that were involved, as well as Allison Barker, whose lab I'm in currently and who I will be working with on the naked mole rats. And thank you all for your attention.
Great. Thanks so much, Dori. I love that you named them all. That is so cute. They each have their own individual names.
They do, yes.
Great. So just while we're waiting for some questions from the chat, we do have a few from the committee. So one from Ebby: can this be used for other modalities of communication apart from vocal ones, like visual signals?
That's a very good question. I'm not as well versed in other modalities of communication. I would expect to some extent that you could. I think the advantage of the vocal communication is that they are very, very distinct and very measurable. I know in the talk earlier by Julia, she mentioned as well that, you know, a lot of the other signals are very hard to measure, so we're not quite sure always what's going on. I would also like to note that a lot of this stuff, even though obviously we're now looking at vocal communication, is not simply a vocal behavior, right? So the fee calls, they perform in a certain context. As soon as, for example, they can see another monkey, suddenly this whole behavior changes. So that is to say, like, visual behavior is very, very important, especially for these guys, but across the board. So I think rather than thinking about it being applied to different modalities, I would say it's probably, it will probably have to include all other modalities.
Great. And another short one is, do you expect any variation with age? So maybe younger monkeys coordinate less when they're young, or what were the age of the monkeys that you used?
So mine included, the youngest one was 9 months, the oldest one was 7 years. So quite a wide range. So this is a very good point. Under 9 months, this is roughly the age where they get sort of vocally mature. Under that age, they do show very much like more interruptions. They're less good at coordinating, and they're still learning this. There's two very interesting papers about the effect of ontogeny on this behavior, if you're more interested in that. So within my group of monkeys, I didn't see that effect anymore because they were all vocally mature.
Great. And then just a few coming in from the chat. One again from Evie saying, very cool work. I might have missed it, but did you have to put relative importance or weights on your input parameters for the model? If so, how did you decide this?
I did not actually. So I did play around with this at some point, but in the end, there's no weights on them. So they're fitted on the raw data essentially. So if you have a probability of 1 for calling, then if that probability raises by like 30% from the measurements after a call occurs, for example, then that was the measurement that was taken. So there's no weights in it. It's basically fitted on the data directly.
Great, thank you. Another one from the chat from Lore. So thanks for the talk, Dori. I was wondering, do you expect, variation with age. Sorry, I had already read that one from Lore. So next is David McCluskey. So great talk, very interesting. Sorry if this was covered already, but what is the purpose of their communication? Are they reassuring each other? Are they trying to establish location?
That's a great question. So the main hypothesis at the moment is that they're establishing location. So in the wild, when they make these calls, in more than half of the cases, I think in almost 2/3 of the cases, the actual response in the wild is a movement towards the source of the call. So they use it to reestablish visual contact with each other. So obviously this is kind of a factor that we're not including because they're not able to walk towards each other, right? They're both on either side of the room. And this is also something that I still have a small project on to see like whether they perform this kind of behavior as well.
Great, awesome, thank you. And so it doesn't look like there's any other questions coming from the chat. And so that about rounds out our session. So thank you again, Dori. If anyone has any more questions for Dori, or maybe wants to know who their favorite marmoset was out of all the names, you can check out their Discord channel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dori. And so we will hop over to our next speaker.